Right, let's go into our first panel session immediately. And of course, at the end of the session, we welcome questions from the floor through Slido. And the panelists for this session, I would like to invite them on stage. Mr. Ting Ching Zung, Executive Vice President, Strategy and Corporate Development of Sarawak Energy. Dr. Alexey Kravchenko, Economic Affairs Officer at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for the Asia and the Pacific. He'll be joining us virtually. Mr. Satya Riayatsyah Syafruddin, Chief Strategy and Sustainability Officer and Moderator for this session, is the founder and Managing Director of Eco-Business, Asia Pacific's leading independent media and business intelligence organization dedicated to sustainable development, and she is recognized as a sustainability pioneer with 2 decades of experience in media, sustainable development and ESG issues globally. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to pass the floor over to the moderator, Ms. Jessica Cheam. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. First, I'd like to thank UNG Malaysia for the invitation to moderate this opening discussion. I am Jessica Cheam, the founder and managing director of Eco-Business. We're Asia Pacific's largest media and business intelligence platform dedicated to sustainable development. I've just come from Singapore last night, and in fact, I've just arrived back from the B20 and G20 summits in Bali, where the energy transition was firmly in the spotlight. You might have heard that the Just Energy Transition Partnership was launched by US President Joe Biden and Indonesian President Jokowi, with some $20 billion now being mobilized by US, Japan, multilateral banks to help Indonesia move from coal to renewable energy. I also had the Petronas chief, Datuk Taufik, on my panel at the B20, and he shared that Petronas, as Malaysia's state energy giant, is facing existential questions, and that the industry is now undergoing a massive transformation and has earmarked 20% of its capex to invest in decarbonization and into renewables. At the same time, the COP27 Global Climate Change meeting that was happening in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt also saw climate finance as a huge agenda item, and the meeting saw nations finally agreeing on loss and damage and funding by developed countries for developing countries to address the impacts of climate change. Now, ASEAN as a region is at the brunt of this, and we've seen this in headlines. We are facing a climate crisis, we're facing growing populations and rapid urbanization, but at the same time, we're facing huge energy demand while we have to decarbonize our economies. So the million-dollar question, or billion-dollar question, I suppose, is how will ASEAN manage to drive its economic development agenda while at the same time achieving decarbonization, meeting its Paris Agreement commitments, and ensuring that this energy transition is just and affordable? I'm delighted to have with me this morning some distinguished speakers who will share some perspectives and help answer this question, as well as discuss how corporate ambition and action can help ASEAN on this decarbonization path. Joining me are the panelists that have already been introduced, so I won't repeat them, and I now like just to dive right into it and invite Ching Zung to please give your perspectives on the topic and share with us, what your organization is doing on this.
Hello, testing. Yeah, I'm actually from Sarawak, the third largest island in the world, Borneo. So what we are doing basically to support renewable energy, we are basically, our primary energy support is from large-scale hydropower. And I believe large-scale hydropower is the most sustainable energy to support the economic growth of Southeast Asia. At this part of the world, we are considered a developing country. So large-scale hydro provides the most reliable, sustainable, and affordable energy to support the development and the economic growth of that particular country and across this region as well. So nonetheless, there are still some voice talking about whether large-scale hydro is a source of green renewable energy. Whether it is green or not, I think until now they are still debating, but it is no doubt renewable energy that will definitely reduce carbon emissions. Sarawak Energy, in the past 7 years, we have reduced more than 70% of carbon emission in the state, and we are the largest renewable energy contributor to Malaysia as well. Currently, our target is always maintaining renewable energy at least 60% of our generation mix. And we are also promoting our renewable energy certificate, and we are one of the first one to launch a renewable energy certificate in Southeast Asia. So so what I'm trying to say, we are trying to maintain our gen mix at minimum about 60% of our production of installed capacity, supported by gas and limited coal, to make sure the reliability and security of our power supply.
Thank you very much. I'll come back to you. I think it's very impressive that you've held as high as a 60-70% renewable energy mix. That's something that a lot of energy companies are aspiring towards. Satya, I'll come to you. Tell us more about what you're doing at Jentayu Sustainables and how renewable energy is part of your organization strategy.
Right. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to all. Thank you so much for inviting us over here. First of all, let me just convey the apology from our chairman, Dato' Beros. He's not feeling well. He wished to be here, but he's not feeling well. And this is not the case where you order something and you get something else, right? So it's okay. So the second part is perhaps I'd like to introduce a little bit about Jentayu, who Jentayu Sustainables is. Now, Jentayu is formerly known as IPMUDA. IPMUDA is a company that was formed back in 1975. So it's an old company. But the key word here is actually transformation, and that transformation happened in 2020 when Dato' Beros was adamant that we should put responsibility, we should put sustainability revolving around this company as a core of this company. And that is why we're moving into renewable energy and we're moving into healthcare. So today, Jentayu Sustainables is known as a company that does renewable energy as well as healthcare. Now let's talk a little bit about the things that we do. We are also from Borneo. I'm from Borneo, I'm from Sabah. Sarawak is our bigger brother. We're the smaller ones. So we do have hydro plant installation in Sabah, in Talikosang, in Tenom. It's 40 megawatt. It's a smaller size compared to what Sarawak Energy have. But the aspiration is to support Sabah in its energy requirement over there. And having a mix of more renewable energy for Sabah, I think it's going to be great. We also have solar panel, solar installation in Pokok Sena, in Kedah. It's not big, but it's okay. But what we see, from what I see here, between solar and also hydro, there are challenges to it. Solar is pretty, it's been around for 10, 12 years around. So the processes in getting solar up and running is pretty out there. People know the processes. But for hydro, the challenges is it's a little unknown. We have to do a whole lot of things before getting it passed by the government. And the process takes a whole lot. The development process of hydro pun, it's not easy, it's not fast, it takes time, right? So those are the challenges that we face, but that's external, but internally as well, as we are transforming, it's a painful and excruciating experience. But alhamdulillah, we have gone to that point and we are now providing Malaysia with renewable energy. Thank you.
That's a great story. Thank you very much for sharing. Going to Dr. Alexey, who's joined us virtually. Over to you on your thoughts on ASEAN decarbonization path, as well as your experience in trade policy. How is that helping the region achieve that?
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. It's the second time I'm joining this event. Last year was a bit ahead of the time. I actually gave a talk about how trade is related to climate action. And most people think of trade as something negative related to CO2 emissions because, well, you have transportation and so forth. But I try to argue that no, it's not the only way how trade is related to climate change, because trade is indispensable for transfer of technology, for transfer of goods that are necessary for transition to green economy. We need solar panels, we need turbines. We need all the supporting things that not one country produces. So trade is indispensable for the transfer of green technology. Now, another thing, trade is it's not that clear how trade is related to the mix of products that you have. And so what we've tried to do in the past years to develop some tools to help policymakers to make judgments and evaluate the effect of their trade policies on CO2 emissions. So I would like to quickly just share with you the quick introduction of this tool. I hope you can see my screen. This is TINA. So currently our member states are involved in more than 200 trade agreements, with many more being negotiated. However, the developing countries often lack the necessary analytical skills and resources to prepare well for trade negotiations and need help. So in the past, ASCAP has been asked many times to assist with impact assessment studies, but such analytical studies typically take months to carry out and require specialized knowledge and significant financial resources. It meant that ASCAP could help at most 1 or 2 countries at a time, and that countries with limited resources faced a clear disadvantage preparing for trade negotiations. So the underlying idea behind TINA was to automate many of the tasks involved in preparing for negotiations, so the time and financial savings could be spent more productively elsewhere. And all member states, particularly countries with special needs, could benefit. So ever since we showed the first version of TINA, the response has been unanimous. Oh, how I wish TINA was there when I was working on such and such trade agreement. Now, TINA is not just a website that presents data. It is a complex, sophisticated piece of analytical software that we developed from scratch, and then you can access online for free. It carries out complex calculations that use millions of pieces of information from multiple sources, analyzes text of trade agreements, and much more. The work that previously took months to do by expensive consultants can now be freely obtained in just a few minutes. So we're not stopping here. We are in talks with ILO to include modules in TINA to ensure that the most vulnerable are not left behind during trade negotiations. We want to encourage the use of provisions to address climate change, which is why I'm here. And we want to make certain that during the next pandemic, there'll be trade provisions to ensure equitable access to medical supplies. So we want to leverage TINA as an inclusive platform to guide the region's new generation of trade agreements to contribute positively towards sustainable development, ensuring all countries get their fair share of benefits from future trade deals. And so, as I said, we've been working on TINA for a while, and just recently we added the CO2 effects module, where you can see how changes in trade volumes due to trade agreements, what effect they have on CO2 emissions in terms of the content in the goods themselves, as well as the transportation. And you can access TINA via this link. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for underlying how important trade is in the renewable energy markets in ASEAN. I think for the longest time, the ASEAN member states have been talking about the ASEAN power grid, and we're finally actually seeing something happen after 20 years of it being talked about, and now there's renewable energy that's being exported from Laos and Thailand down through Malaysia to Singapore. And when I was speaking in Indonesia, there's also a huge project called Sun Cable, which is a 20 gigawatt solar project that is going from Australia to the Northern Territory to Darwin to Singapore as well. And you can see how the region is finally coming on board in terms of trading of power as well as capabilities, technologies. So on this topic of, going on this path of decarbonization, a question I'd like to ask all of you is that many companies today, including those in this room, have made net zero targets. And getting to net zero is a complicated task because you have to first get your own house in order, make sure that you are minimizing your carbon footprint at all levels and making sure it's inclusive. But then at the end of the day, you still have residual emissions that you need to offset. So have you seen this corporate movement enable you then to also be able to invest more into renewable energy? And how do organizations who are not energy companies, who do not have access to renewable energy, how do they get access to these types of offsets and also ways in which they can get to net zero?
Well, it's really exciting to see the ASEAN power grid because I come from a telco background, and when we come to telco, it's all about interconnectivity between countries. Now that I understand that there's going to be an ASEAN power grid, it's really interesting where you could actually sell energy from one country, cross-border transactions. In ASEAN, not many countries are endowed with the natural infrastructure for renewables. Some are small, some are big, but it's really come to a point where ASEAN can come as a bloc to actually help each other, to actually coordinate, to actually cooperate between each countries on how we can make ASEAN clean. Now, in terms of corporate, yes, I think there's a great movement we see in the corporate sector where we are, for instance, like Jentayu itself, we just established our own sustainability pillars, our sustainability framework, where we are reducing our carbon footprint as much as we can, but at the same time, because we are naturally producing renewable energy, we are also looking into carbon credits and carbon renewable energy certificates. That allow us to actually understand better in terms of, hey, what is carbon management all about? What is carbon audit is all about? So it kind of like opens up to a whole lot of different dimension of the business, not just selling electricity, but more than that. So with the nation's commitment into net zero, I think all the ASEAN countries have the commitment of net zero to 2050, some in 2060. I think it's going to drive corporates to actually move in that direction as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you make, because ASEAN as a regional bloc has been receiving a lot of attention because of its potential, and it's finally coming together, and it's great to see that momentum. The Scandinavian countries, for example, have already been trading energy between themselves at a very high efficiency and enabling them to be 100% powered by renewables on some days. Ching, you have some?
Yeah, actually, starting from 2016, we have started trading of energy to Kalimantan, to Indonesia, from West Sarawak to West Kalimantan, and we have also with our neighbor Sabah, we have signed a power exchange agreement targeting to have interconnection by 2024, 2025 actually. So our dream is always to become a Borneo powerhouse, supporting our, if we have any excess renewable energy, then we can support Kalimantan, we can support Sabah, we can even support Brunei. And at this point in time, we are also in some negotiation with our neighboring country like Singapore, whether we can export some of our renewable energy to Singapore. And in net zero, of course, I have mentioned earlier, we have launched our renewable energy certificate, and we are also encouraging the people in Sarawak, the citizens in Sarawak, to enter into net energy metering kind of arrangement. If they are willing to, install solar panel at the rooftop, etc., we are ready to implement this net energy metering program with all of them. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And that also, reminds me that Malaysia is actually developing its own voluntary carbon trading platform. And I wondered, over to Alexey, if you have some thoughts about how carbon markets really can support the growth of renewables in ASEAN.
Yeah, thanks so much. So last year in the report that I mentioned, the Asia Pacific Trade and Investment Report, carbon markets are indeed seen as the most optimum way, particularly a global carbon market as a pathway towards reducing the emissions. The global carbon market, however, is far away from even being potentially discussed, let alone implemented. So regional initiatives such as the ones in the EU bloc, as well as potentially in ASEAN, are sort of the compromise that could offer a lot of potential of trading the carbons between those who can afford to sequester carbon or produce green energy for those who demand for it and spread those carbon credits around. I think that's definitely the regional cooperation in such a way is definitely a way to go.
Thank you very much. With an eye on the time, because I know we're keeping strict time, I'd just like to ask a kind of final question to all three of you, and that really is, if you had a magic wand, what would you like to see in this year ahead that you believe would move the needle for renewable energy adoption in ASEAN?
I think first of all, is for all of us to recognize that large-scale hydro is the fundamental supplier of power, and is most sustainable and reliable and affordable for especially developing country. So even though if we have realized all our potential hydropower in Sarawak, it will also only take out about 2% of our land size. So I'm actually urge those people who's against large-scale renewable power to support, especially for developing country. We really need this kind of affordable power. Reliable to support the economic growth of especially Asian country, yeah. And also interconnection is one of the very important targets that we all should work towards, yeah.
Thank you. Satya.
For me personally, I like to see the utilization of renewable energy being done, especially in states like Sabah. Now, there's a statistics that was crafted by DOSM, Department of Statistics Malaysia, talking about the 10 most poorest district in Malaysia. One of it is in Kelantan, one of it is in Sarawak, and 8 of it is in Sabah. I felt embarrassed at the same time, but I felt the need for us to move into helping out this district. These districts are poor because they are unelectrified, because they are way in the rural areas of Sabah. So Sabah is not unique to ASEAN. I think there's a lot of such districts in Philippines, in Cambodia, and whatnot. So if we electrify them, I think we can uplift the economy instead.
Well said. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Alexey.
Well, just parting words in my, I don't have a lot to say on renewable energy, but do want to stress that the path towards decarbonization is not just about the energy mix. We have to also look at making the existing processes not just energy efficiency, more efficient, more energy efficient. I'm talking about making sure that there are regulations on energy efficient light bulbs, that trade procedures are streamlined, that goods can shift between borders as fast, as smoothly as possible without paperwork and the bureaucracy. And there are many low-hanging fruit like this that can help us achieve the carbon targets in complementing to movement towards the greener energy mixes.
That, I'd like to thank my panelists for a really insightful discussion. Apologies that we had to cut this panel short, but feel free to reach out to any one of us after this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jessica Cheam, Founder and Managing Director of EcoBusiness. Thank you to all our panelists for this session, Renewable Energy Panel. Thank you.